How did a democratic country produce 9 million victims in almost 6 decades? The conflict has affected all of us. The Colombian population needs to understand what happened, who did it happen to, how did it happen, why did it happen, and why does it keep happening? Since its creation, the Truth Commission has traveled throughout the country to listen to the testimonies of more than 25,000 Colombians. We have held more than 500 face-to-face and online events, overcoming distance and the pandemic. Thousands of Colombians have voluntarily given their testimonies to shed light on what happened during the Colombian armed conflict. Now the country will receive the results of this exercise in clarification, given dignity, recognition, and coexistence, which we hope will become the engine for non-repetition. The time has come to deliver the final report of the Truth Commission to the country. It will have several chapters, each of which seeks to respond to the topics requested by the mandate. It's a compilation of the research and findings that we have been working on since the Truth Commission was created. This report may be consulted or downloaded in its entirety and complemented with immersive content on the digital platform. This is the most comprehensive account of the conflict in Colombia. It doesn't only bring together the chapters of the final report, but also the work of the Truth Commission over the years, the methodologies implemented, and the files that give an account of this work. As part of a wider picture, the digital platform aims to coordinate, deepen, and contextualize the overall narrative of the conflict. We want to put forward an interactive, immersive, and inclusive experience that will become an instrument the country can use to talk and listen and may stretch across time and space. The entire Colombian population is included in this story, so no one is left out. We make the victims visible and also those perpetrators who voluntarily provided their testimonies. We want new generations to connect with each other and strengthen their commitment to transformation. The truth can set people free. The truth builds scenarios of coexistence. The truth contributes to the dignity of all men and women. The truth is a contribution to non-repetition. Legacy of the Truth Commission.
Porque acepté con tanta alegría la invitación de la Comisión de la Verdad por amor a los colombianos presentes que quieren saber su pasado, que tienen el valor de enfrentar la historia, los hechos y acontecimientos del conflicto armado, por los que tienen sed de verdad, que están hartos de no enfrentar, de negar, de esquivar la pregunta de la culpa, del perdón, de la no repetición, por admiración de las víctimas y respeto por los victimarios presentes que pidieron perdón.
El trabajo en las regiones también nos parece muy relevante. Creo que se ha generado mucha confianza en las comunidades, confianza en las víctimas, confianza en los excombatientes a través del trabajo en la región. La comisión también es la materialización de lo que mucho destacamos del Acuerdo de Paz, que es las víctimas en el centro, ¿no? Entonces, y ahí creo que hemos tenido ya, a través del trabajo de la comisión, a través del trabajo de las entidades, muchas historias ya de inspiración del papel de las víctimas, y creo que hay que también seguirlo destacando.
Todos los que estamos aquí vivimos esa guerra, no solamente tal vereda, no, todos lo vivimos, y fue muy triste y murieron muchas amistades, mucha gente muy allegada a uno, se desaparecieron.
What we are doing now in Colombia is a big challenge. After 50 years of armed conflict between the FARC people and the Colombian state, about 9 million people were affected and are victims of the conflict. They were displaced, or from their territories.
Muchos de nuestros aliados de comunidad internacional, así como otros aliados, han estado en el territorio desde hace mucho tiempo y van a seguirlo estando. Entonces, haber contado con su apoyo, con su mano guía, con su confianza para desarrollar esto, pues para nosotros fue muy favorable. Una entidad que tenía solamente 3 años para generar procesos, pues lo mejor que podía hacer era tomarse las manos de los aliados, entrar en contacto con los diversos actores en el territorio y cuando nos retiremos saber que los procesos pueden seguir en el territorio también.
Es muy importante trabajar de la mano con la Comisión de la Verdad para tejer esas historias desde los territorios más aislados, más alejados en el país y asegurar que las voces de tantas personas que han sido silenciadas por décadas son escuchadas.
Colombia se demuestra a sí misma y al mundo que no se trata de olvidar. No se trata de olvidar o pensar que nada pasó, se trata de una búsqueda para encontrar una salida a un conflicto tan complejo y para encontrar, sobre todo, una sanación a las heridas que este conflicto ha dejado. Y quiero que sepan que desde la Unión Europea y desde la comunidad internacional estamos interesados en apoyar esa búsqueda de Colombia.
Las recomendaciones de la Comisión de la Verdad van a ser esenciales para ayudar a construir ese camino de la reconciliación y todo el proceso de seguimiento que se le pueda dar a esas recomendaciones van a ser muy importantes, tanto de parte del Estado como de la sociedad civil, pero también de la comunidad internacional y nosotros pues estamos comprometidos a también apoyar en ese seguimiento y que se puedan realizar esas recomendaciones para poder ayudar a Colombia en ese camino de la reparación y de la no repetición, pero también de la reconciliación y la justicia para todos.
How did a democratic country produce 9 million victims in almost 6 decades? The conflict has affected all of us. The Colombian population needs to understand what happened, who did it happen to, how did it happen, why did it happen, and why does it keep happening? Since its creation, the Truth Commission has traveled throughout the country to listen to the testimonies of more than 25,000 Colombians. We have held more than 500 face-to-face and online events, overcoming distance and the pandemic. Thousands of Colombians have voluntarily given their testimonies to shed light on what happened during the Colombian armed conflict. Now the country will receive the results of this exercise in clarification, given dignity, recognition, and coexistence, which we hope will become the engine for non-repetition. The time has come to deliver the final report of the Truth Commission to the country. It will have several chapters, each of which seeks to respond to the topics requested by the mandate. It's a compilation of the research and findings that we have been working on since the Truth Commission was created. This report may be consulted or downloaded in its entirety and complemented with immersive content on the digital platform. This is the most comprehensive account of the conflict in Colombia. It doesn't only bring together the chapters of the final report, but also the work of the Truth Commission over the years, the methodologies implemented, and the files that give an account of this work. As part of a wider picture, the digital platform aims to coordinate, deepen, and contextualize the overall narrative of the conflict. We want to put forward an interactive, immersive, and inclusive...
Welcome all those who are on site and online. After this lunch break, we want to introduce this digital piece, which was originally a stage. It has been displayed 3 times in a theater but because of the principle, because of what it represents for the effort, we recorded in partnership with Caracol to disseminate it further and to have a bigger impact than the impact that it had in the Julio Mario Santo Domingo Theater on July 5th, 2021. This work art was conceived for the delivery of the report when we were going to deliver it in November 2021. And since everything was booked, ready, more than 120 actors on the stage, we decided to maintain the date by the end of 2021 for the inauguration. More on-site displays were not ensured, so that's why we recorded digitally to share it by TV and online, and we have had the chance to show it twice more in Medellin on June 8th. In the morning we were in Medellin and at night in Bogota. I believe these days it was displayed in Cali, like an on-stage show. It has been broadcasted in Canal Capital and Caracol and is also available in our transmedia platform for anybody who is willing to watch it. This is our on-stage work, more than 120 artists. His name is Develaciones or Revelations. Is the art and culture of the territories. There are only 10 or 12 artists who are professional actors and actresses. The remainder of the people that you see are actors and actresses who do this from their passion, their conviction, and their gift in the territories. And through a very important artistic composition exercise, we were able to put together one work. This is all. Well, we hope you enjoy it. It's shocking. It's a shocking display of what our armed conflict has been, and also the artistic gifts that we have in the territories that emerge as a counteract against warfare. Then we will have a break, and then we will continue with the last conversation of these 2 working days.
Anillo del Mar, Puerto Escondido, Vigía del Fuerte, San Andrés de Sotavento, Ensenada de Utría, Barranca Bermeja, Lebrija, Manatí, Media Luna, Mecoclí, Punta Ardita, El Cabo de la Vela, Coconuco, Aracataca, Heliconia, Barranco de Loba, Belén de Umbría, Bocas de Satinga, San Bernardo del Viento, Bojayá, Santianga, Anorí, Palmillas, Guatapurí, Catatumbo, Paz de Ariporo, Serranía del Araraquara, Puerto Arrendajo, Mesa de la Lindosa, Charambirá, Sabanas de la Fuga, Mirití, Paraná, Amanabén, Tempestad, María Piri, Baudó, Apaporis, Fuente de Oro, Jurado, Agua Azul, Puerto Estrella, Páramo de las Hermosas, Bahía Solano, Río Apure, Galera Zamba, Golfo de Copica, El Olvido, Belén de los Andaquíes, Timbiquí, Río Iqui, Boqui, Tierra Adentro, Choró, Serranía de los Paraguas, Páramo de las Barajas, Lejanías, Alto Andabobos, Abriaquí, Párate Bueno, en Sumapaz.
¿Cuánto hace que se fue el tren de la tarde? ¿Cuánto hace linda que se fue? Que se fue el tren de la tarde, que se fue que se fue el tren de la tarde.
Yo si quiero
I do want to take advantage
decir un par de
to
cosas
say
que tiene que
a
saber
few
todo
things
muchacho que
that
pretenda cambiar.
any boy that intends to change
Yo
this
siempre
country
he respetado
has to
la vida.
do. I have always respected life.
No matarás.
You
Le
shall
dijo el Señor
not
a
kill,
Moisés.
the Lord said to Moses.
No matarás.
You shall not kill.
Siempre he creído
Always,
en lo que
I have
usted
always
cree,
believed what you
que
believe.
salvo los pocos
That
monstruos
unless
que
the few
sabemos,
monsters that we know,
todos,
don't you know?
absolutamente todos,
Everybody,
aquí y allá
absolutely
somos
everybody here
iguales
and
ante la
there
ley y
are the
ante
same
Dios.
before the law and before
Que a
God.
las gentes hay que darles
That
las mismas
people
oportunidades,
must be
claro que
given the
sí,
same
por supuesto que
opportunities.
sí.
Of course, yes. Should
Pero lo que
receive the same
ustedes no
opportunities, but
saben,
what you don't
muchachos,
know,
porque están muy biches,
boys, because you are too young,
es que toda esta
all this
violencia
is that
que
all
ustedes
this
ahora
violence
congregan,
that you
¿no?
are
Y que ha incendiado y aterrorizado este
accusing
paraíso,
and that has
pues
blazed
curiosamente
this
nunca ha
paradise.
venido de las
As a matter
gentes
of
que trabajan de
curiosity, has
sol a
never
sol y de
come from the
verano.
people that work every day. Never.
Y mientras los desmemoriados
And
están
as
en
those
gavilla, en
who
lodazal y
forgive
otras, ¿no? Porque
go
les encanta.
as a crowd They say to stop, to move on. Please, stop to move on. What does it mean? And to sodomize the statue of Mr. Americus Vespucius and to shake the hatred of classes. In Colombia, there are decent Colombians, made and upright, doing and creating their country in spite of the insults. Let's sit down together. It's true that Colombia has been quite a bit, how to say it so it doesn't sound so disgruntled, kind of unequal and unjust. I will not deny it because you can see poverty wherever you go, but not even in Ecuador, not even in Peru, nor Bolivia, have always used the destination of people as an excuse to cause harm or to cause evil. Never. That only happens here and in Cuba. In Cuba. And I wonder why. This is a beautiful land, so pretty, but unfortunately has lived full of rats that if they don't have not been able to take it over, and we appreciate it. You can talk to me about politics all the way, all you want. Human rights, women's rights, governments, the minorities, homosexuals, anything. But look, a boat floats or it doesn't float. That's it. Who says that the captain will be on the live reincorporating intruders? This country is a company that has been sabotaged from within by parasites, by vagrants. And I ask you again, why? Why? And the few efficiency, the few profitability that Colombia has had is because, in spite the fact of being cornered by stowaways, we have been always saved the bodies. We have been in war against all the bunch of felons and criminals. Yes, war is dirty. War is awful. War even goes out of the jurisdiction of God. Isn't it like that? Your honor, but if we don't have it, what are we going to do? If we don't apply pesticide, we don't kill the insects. That is legitimate defense. That is to protect the private property. It is to improve productivity. It is to yield results. And how do you measure war? Well, with kills in action. How can you measure war? I tell you again, boys, I have always believed what you believe. Everybody in this table believe in charity, for sure, but I don't want you to confuse Colombian heroes and pay. Look at this. Look at this. I don't want you to forget that if you want to change this country today, it's because thanks to the war, there is a country.
La tierra es sabia, la tierra piensa. Guardia, guardia, fuerza, fuerza. Guardianes de la vida, guardianes del planeta, de esta tierra árida, de esta tierra nuestra. ¡Kihuetensas! 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 ¡Guardia, guardia! ¡Guardia, guardia! ¡Por mi raza! ¡Por mi raza! ¿Hasta cuándo? ¿Hasta cuándo?
En una cama de campo. Ahí estaba Cristo a la muerte. Y en cama de campo nace. Ay, mi Dios, y en cama de campo muere, y en cama de campo nace, ay, mi Dios, y en cama de campo muere. Ay, qué cama tan angosta. Ay, que ni de día se puede, que para caber en ella, ay, mi Dios, un pie sobre otro. el silencio de la noche lo llevo en el alma. Se hace más larga la espera y el corazón se desangra. Cuando todo se ha perdido, esperanza. Cuando no hay mañana, cuando no hay ni camino, esperanza, ya no queda nada. Ay, esperanza mía.
Guayaka na shipira tumaka. Es gunu. Es muru. Es buchi. Kawayu. Si huyaka ya es tu umay. Na tu huayka ya. Ma. No lo huya, no es París. No lo huya, no es Guarrara. Tumaca, no es Guacororo. Guayas cororo tumaca. Chojas en tu Guacororo ya. Sinanguemira. Shaitawa. Guayray. Sinantuanuika ya su umay. Huya, no mamá.
tu corazón con el mío. Ay, 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 ay. Qué bonita es nuestra gente, qué bonita es nuestra tierra. Sería mucho más bonita si la tierra fuera nuestra palomita, nube de agua que alumbre el sol en el cielo después de la oscuridad, que vuelva a brillar la vida con la luz de la verdad.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. This was a performance that we saw today, feeling the sorrow of forced recruitment, the exile, the sorrow of the mothers of Soacha, but also the resistance, the power we have there, the indigenous guard, and all the people who have resisted and have built through culture our country. From the Pacific, you saw the multicultural aspects, all the artists are here, all the groups. As we told you before, this is part of transmedia, so this can be a tool for conversation, for dialogue and education in different places. We also had last year, in 5 opportunities last year, I guess, or maybe this year, in the Ibero-American Festival of Bogota. We had a full session in the 5 times it was displayed, and this piece is part of the legacy from the artistic and cultural performance for dialogue and healing. Thank you so much, and now we're going to a short coffee break. We are going to turn on the lights and the blinds, and then we will go to the last conversation of today. The perspective is not what is just transitional just offering to Colombia, but what is Colombia offering to the world in terms of transitional justice. We'll have different guests: Eduardo Cifuentes, Francisco Del Ru, Elena Uran, Victoria Sandino, moderated by Roberto Menendez, the MAPP-OAS head of Colombia, and the CAPAS Institute director. Thank you very much.
Hoy yo soy tu canto, yo soy el perdón, soy la convivencia, reconciliación. Yo Yo soy la esperanza, yo soy la verdad. Yo no tengo dueños, yo soy libertad. Soy Colombia entera, soy pluralidad, soy la voz de todos, yo soy la verdad. Soy Yo soy tu canto, yo soy el perdón, soy la convivencia, reconciliación. Yo soy la esperanza, yo soy la verdad. Yo no tengo dueños, yo soy libertad. Soy Colombia entera, soy pluralidad, soy la voz de todos, yo soy la verdad.
Soy Tumaco entero, soy Buenaventura y aquí me quedo. Yo soy esa tierra, soy el verde mar, yo soy la montaña, soy el litoral. Yo soy esa tierra, soy el verde mar, yo soy la montaña, soy el litoral. Yo soy el Pacífico que resistió todas las tragedias, la guerra y el dolor. Yo soy resistencia, yo soy compasión, soy lo que vivimos y lo que se olvidó. Yo soy la marimba que volvió a entonar este canto alegre, canto a la verdad. Canto a la verdad.
Yo soy tu canto, yo soy el perdón, soy la convivencia, reconciliación. Yo soy la esperanza, yo soy la verdad. Yo no tengo dueños, yo soy libertad. Soy Colombia entera, soy pluralidad, soy la voz de todos, yo soy la verdad. Soy Yo soy tu canto, yo soy el perdón, soy la convivencia, reconciliación. Yo soy la esperanza, yo soy la verdad. Yo no tengo dueños, yo soy libertad. Soy Colombia entera, soy pluralidad, soy la voz de todos, yo soy la verdad. Yo soy tu canto, yo soy el perdón, soy la convivencia, reconciliación. Yo soy la esperanza, yo soy la verdad. Yo no tengo dueños, yo soy libertad. Soy Colombia entera, soy pluralidad, soy la voz de todos, yo soy la verdad. Soy el Pacífico. Yo soy tu canto, yo soy el perdón, soy la convivencia, reconciliación. Yo soy la esperanza, yo soy la verdad. Yo no tengo dueños, yo soy libertad. Soy Colombia entera, soy pluralidad, soy la voz de todos, yo soy la verdad.
Alejo, ¿tú me dices? Sí. Si quieres. Si quieres. Buenas tardes para las...
Good afternoon for the people on site and also the people following us through social networks. Thank you for joining to this space that we have prepared in the socialization and dissemination phase of the Truth Commission report. The Truth Commission is delivering the sustainability report and with a ongoing reflection these 2 days, which has been what contributes. The Truth Commission contributes, and today, in this space, in this venue, the comprehensive system for peace, to transitional justice in the world. But also, in other sessions, we have had the chance to do a reverse reflection. What contributions we had from the world of transitional justice for the Truth Commission. So it's really an honor to wrap up these 2 days that have been surrounded by multiple and diverse partners that the Truth Commission has had throughout this journey and give accountability. And yesterday, we had the 7 people who are part of the monitoring and surveillance committee for the implementation of the recommendations for non-repetition. They are still in this room, so thank you all for remaining with us. We close these 2 days with this session. The construction of the Truth Commission, the contribution of the Truth Commission and the comprehensive system for peace to the practice of transitional justice. We have heard these days how innovative the result of the negotiations of Point 5 was. We've had several international experts that have reminded this aspect and have requested to see how valuable it is what we did. Sometimes it is hard to look at the perspective, and that's wonderful. We had a wonderful conversation organized. 2 people are on their way, but we don't want to delay more these 2 people. We have asked them to follow the beginning of this conversation through the channels, YouTube channels, and therefore I welcome Stefan Peters. As you have seen these 2 days, we have always, for the beginning of this, every section, the presentation, the introduction of one reflection, one position, academic practice in regards to the topic that will be considered, and subsequently move on to the conversation between considering the different perspectives. Let's begin with Stefan Peters, Academic Director of Capaz Institute and Professor of Universität Listen in Germany. He studied political science and conflict studies in Mafog University and Complutense University of Madrid. During the mandate of the Commission, Capaz was alive for the work of this node in Germany as well as many other research projects. Alfredo Molano Bravo, and in the face of the implementation of the agency for the massive dissemination, Capaz has been always also allied of the unit of missing persons. So it's a strategic ally, Stefan, in this space. Thank you very much for your willingness. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for having me here, and at the same time for the invitation to be part in this closing panel. A closing panel is a challenge. To speak in a closing panel is an additional challenge because we have talked about many things that we should say here during these last 2 days. What I would like to do is, I'll try not to repeat, but basically a reflection on which have been the achievements of the comprehensive system, but also what are some of the challenges that the comprehensive system is facing. I would like to start off by mentioning the achievements. Start with something that Pacho de Rue mentioned yesterday and during the first panel during the inauguration. If I'm not wrong, he asked, why is it that the international community has so much tenderness towards Colombia? And he answered that maybe it's because the quality of people, all what Colombia means. And maybe this just wasn't one point, but I would say that there is one more. Colombia arrives in the international politics with hope, knowing that the peace process is not easy, but look what's happening in the world. And here it's moving on. Yeah, it's true. I can imagine. We would have loved more a faster process. We are in a peace process thanks to a peace negotiation. What we see is the power of word, but the aim is to reflect on the achievements and then the challenges of the comprehensive system. Achievements. I believe that you have achieved a lot in the investigations, in the hearings. For example, what happened in Ocaña, for example, what happened in Bogota, and of course, the report. The report of the Commission along with the transmedia. It's fundamental for the ownership, which has been considered during these 2 days also. But not only you have not only done your job, you have had an impact that goes beyond 6,200, 402. We know what that number means. That is in some walls and places of the city. It's part of what the daily living is of the people, and not only in Bogota. That is an immense achievement. There is something that the magistrate Miral mentioned. The street is calling, or is talking to us. And the hashtag, there's future if there is truth, hay futuro si hay verdad, in Spanish. The importance of this, especially around June 28th. Even more, those days, Ricardo Coberol from the Commission said that you can purchase online the report with tamales and beer. So in the market, doesn't tell lies, does not lie. There is an interest in that. So I believe that's something that you have achieved. And you have achieved also to get the interest of the people, almost everybody. Why? Because that system has several new aspects, differential approaches, and I will continue to mention some of the challenges and problems that it has. The centralization of the victims, the chapter of the exile, all that I think are bullets that we must highlight, and also we could say we have done something, we have achieved something in the context, in a difficult context, neither from the political point of view nor from the socio-political perspective, and also for the sanitary situation given the pandemic. However, I would also like to mention some challenges. One big challenge from the very beginning has been the wholesomeness of the comprehensive system. What does it mean in practice? And what will this mean in the practice from the end of August, when one of the institutions will not be here anymore? The Commission will not be operating, at least not as has been working during the last years. That means that there will be some asymmetries between institutions, but also thinking on the search of missing persons unit, and also in HEP, and also the claims by some victims and civil society, some macro cases about the forced disappearance, knowing that there are limitations at HEP. Those are tensions and dilemmas. That's a point that I see as one of the challenges that still remains. Secondly, I would like to say the core of the victims, the expectations of the victims, and connected with that, the differential approach. First, we must say something trivial. There are not victims. There's not the universe of victims. The universe of victims is heterogeneous. However, this being said, I must say there was a lot of interest to participate. The reports that have delivered to the HIP, the more than 30,000 testimonies and more. But we know that 30,000 testimonials are a small portion if we think on the 10 million victims. So we're still missing a lot to listen to. We are still falling short to know, maybe not from the Commission, but of the system of the country. And yesterday, Mr. Ledegoff was talking about the importance of slow or gent listening, slowly listening to all. If we listen to the victims carefully, we run short of time. Also, pay attention to the access to institutions, and I want to highlight your territorial work. For instance, access to institutions for people who don't live in Colombia. And in there, the Commission, with that summary in chapter about exile, Colombia, outside Colombia, has made something that is an after, before and after, as for the Truth Commissions in the recommendations. And there I would like to quote something. It says, as a matter of fact, is the last page of that summary related to the participation of victims in exile. In exile, the mechanisms of the comprehensive system. The Commission recommends exile and refuge, given the permanence dimension of violence is part of the cases under the jurisdiction of HIP. They must be virtual spaces must be officialized to carry out judicial hearings from overseas with proceeding guarantees. And also considers that mechanism should be coordinated so that victims in other countries can access to the work of the Search of Missing Persons unit. That's one of the challenges. It's not easy. And also for the people that don't live in the townships. The people living in the townships need resources, inputs to reach their temporal resources. Maybe people that don't speak Spanish as their mother tongue. Maybe that's not their mindset, but all of that within the differential approach, within cross-sectional approaches are challenges. And I believe that we can learn from those contributions of the academy that have studied this. I'd like to quote Rivera Rivero, who did this based on the case number 2 with women from the indigenous group of Agua. And also thinking on the participation, for example, within HEP of victims. If we think in that number, 6,402, how can they participate, that many victims and relatives, in those processes? I think those are challenges connected to the expectations of the victims, not only as for participation, but also in regards to reparation. I believe there is a risk of disappointment. What can we learn from the transnational justice? Again, what you're doing, not only here in Colombia, but also in other places in the world. The differential approaches, cross-sectional approaches. There, Buenaventura talks about the decolonization of transitional justice. How to do that? How to do it if we think on the theoretical fundamentals of transitional justice? They come from a very liberal theoretical fundament, which is not what you search or seek in decolonization. How to do that? As we saw yesterday, today in the morning with Alejandro Castillejo, the topic of nature as a victim, which is also within HEP. This is a challenge. how to prosecute in these processes. These are challenges that go beyond Colombia. And I would also like to say, mention the challenges of the perpetrators, the third parties, and entrepreneurs, for example. In fourth place, and that's the topic in a debate in transitional justice. This is a relatively new, recent debate. To what point should we go beyond transitional justice to something that we could call maybe a transforming and a justice? For example, in the commission, we did emphasis on chauvinism, homophobic, structural racism, and maybe classism, but how to do it amidst these exclusions and inequalities. So what can transitional justice do to transform those forms of exclusion to have a more just and less exclusive country? And the last aspect that I wanted to say is something that we have elaborated upon a lot yesterday and today, the topic of education, about the findings of the Commission, but also the whole comprehensive system. There, knowing that a lot of work has been done, but also acknowledging that there's still work to do, is a task that can never be taken for granted. I believe that we need a national debate about the past and its implications. And now we have talked about the importance of taking this to schools, universities, and to the communities, to the neighborhoods. But I wanted to go further, and I was quoting a philosopher, Latin American philosopher, a musician. Dare yourself, or in Spanish, atrévete. This is not a possibility to say December the 10th, Day of Human Rights. Let's invite the companies a morning, one afternoon, to release the employees, but not free to be at home, but to do reflection on the past and what it means for the future. Either Avianca, Ecopetrol, Crepes and Waffles, and many others couldn't do that, even if maybe from the institutions as the states, from the ministries, from the institutions of the comprehensive systems, from the universities. If we cannot do it, because there we could reach to what we actually need. Stop talking about what we feel many times. Sometimes we talk before the people who are somehow believe and are aware. And I believe that we need controversy. We need to, with ownership, to do those debates with ownership. It doesn't mean that we need a controversy that is valid with everything. Thanks to HEP, thanks to the Commission, and thanks to the unit, we have something where we cannot say 2 plus 2 is not 5, world is not shallow, but to discuss on which have been the root causes and what are the possibilities to move on. Thank you very much.
Querido Stefan, muchas gracias.
Dear Stefan, thank you very much for the 5 reflections. They also collect part of the elements that have been mentioned, but in coordination directly with the whole comprehensive system, which is very important for us. We will keep it as input for the conversation that we will have. So we have the full table. I'll open the floor. Thanking Roberto for being here for this space. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maria, for your invitation. the possibility to participate in this important scenario, privileged space, as these reflection days and work days have been about the comprehensive system of peace and justice in Colombia. The panelists will have the challenge and the privilege to carry on the last panel, the last session. I understand this is a challenge, but also this is an opportunity. It's the opportunity to consolidate, to nail it with ideas, with reflections, specific reflections, the target of this specific panel, and it is trying to individualize, to identify, to highlight which aspects, which components, which elements have provided the system, three institutions of the system, in the development of its mandate that could be considered contributions, relevant contributions to the world as for transitional justice. I will try to do it kind of a dictatorship manner, to share this methodology, encouraging each one of you and also in the institutions to be very specific, very brief in your reflections, in your conversation of some topics that I will propose. At the beginning, I'll talk about privilege. Another privilege will be to close this panel, this conversation, based on three different perspectives. We will take a look from that perspective, from the institutional perspective of the three agencies that made up the system. They included the unit of search of missing persons, but also we will have the perspective of the victims in the opinion of one of them, in the opinion of those who have participated in the conflict and have been accountable of impacts in the opinion of one of them. And I will introduce the people that I insist will have the challenge to answer to these questions that I will ask. Thank you, Stefan, for providing inputs on achievements and challenges, which are some topics that we will elaborate upon. Eduardo Cifuentes, President of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace since 2020. He studied law in the Andes universities and he did a master's degree in the Complutense University of Madrid with experience in constitutional matters. In 1999, he was appointed ombudsman until he resigned in 2003. Between 2009 and 2003 and 2005, he was member of the Hague Court and special attaché for the treatment of conflicts in the International Labor Organization, Luz Marina Monzon. Since February 19th, 2018, is the director of unit of search of missing persons, the framework of the armed conflict. She is lawyer from the Gran Colombia University, magister in the from the National University, and specialist in forensic and criminalistic sciences. She worked in the proceedings of municipal and circuit tribunals. He was judge in the military tribunal and professor in the Industrial de Santander and Externado University. She was also representative of the social organizations before the Commission of the Unit of Search of Missing Persons, an agency that was created in 2000. Francisco de Rue, President of the Commission for the Coexistence and Non-Repetition Commission, Jesuit priest, did studies in philosophy, theology, as well as a PhD In 2016, he received a PhD honoris causa of the Superior Council of the National University of Colombia, has devoted his life to the work for the construction of peace, reconciliation, and dignification of the victims of armed conflict. He assisted the process of listening to the victims in the peace process developed in Havana. Elena Duran, politologist with studies of undergraduate and masters in linguistic and media and tradition studies, has worked in Colombia, Germany, and the United States in different realms of politics, research, communication, and journalism, with a special approach to human rights, justice, migration, and memory politics. Her father was murdered in the assault of Justice Palace, which happened more than 3 decades ago. She has had different relationships with the three agencies of the Comprehensive System for Peace. Finally, Victoria Sandino, signatory of peace and former congresswoman. She is part of the Commission of the Implementation of the Peace Agreements. In 2013, she incorporated the delegation in Havana as only women spokeswoman in the peace process. She contributed especially of gender equality in the agreements under the subcommission of gender. Is one of the leaders of insurgent feminism led by former ex-combatants from the FARC. She has had different levels of relationship also with the three agencies of the system. The method that I propose for this afternoon will be the next one. I will propose a number of questions. Some of them, and I will highlight with clarity, will be addressed to only one of the panelists. In that case, I beg you, please, to answer exclusively the question. Don't take more than 3 or 4 minutes, please. Those who are not recipients of this question can add something, can have a reaction, can contribute a reaction, a brief 1 minute or 2 minute reaction. I don't know how I control this, but you can help me out with this. The other questions will be common for all the panelists. In that case, since there will be 5 opinions for each of the questions, the timing will be shorter. I will ask you to do it in less than 3 or 2 minutes for each question. I would like to start. My first question, honing on a dimension that I understand. It's a cornerstone and elevates to the humanitarian ethical level. It has to do with the dignification and dignity of victims. This will be one of the common questions for the 5 panelists. For institutions, members of the system, I'd like to ask you to tell us, in the development of the duties that you were entrusted, what have you been able to highlight? What have you learned? What has your work produced? The implementation of the mandate as for effective dignity for victims from the institutional perspective. Also, Elena, I will ask you from the personal perspective of a victim, and Victoria from the perspective that you represent as a cannibal in this scenario. Is there freedom of action? There is freedom of action. Anybody can jump in and start right away. 2 or 3 minutes to share your reflections or your assertions. Thank you. Otherwise, my finger democracy will operate. Luz Marina, I see that you are excited and you want to start. I'll start. Thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm honored to be here commemorating the legacy. I want to clarify that I've never been judge of military criminal judge. I was criminal instruction judge. So to clarify on that, what have we learned about the victims? And I would say that we have learned about the dignity. The unit has learned that victims not only have information, as sometimes the institutions with institution believe, we look for them just to receive information, but they are also political subjects that build not just from the relationship of the institutions, but from the demand of their rights. I would like to share in these 3 minutes three histories, three stories that the unit has been able to assist, that has had the honor to assist and contribute to the relief of sufferings. And there are stories, some of them shared with the comprehensive system. One of them is having found finally the body of a girl that was recruited in 2001 in the Commune 13 of Medellin. She, along with 24 youngsters, as she was 16 years old, they were recruited by an illegal armed group and taken to war. And they died. They were killed in action. That's what the information states. Her mom looked for her for a long time, and she talked about the political subjectivity. She could be in one of two graveyards, Santo Domingo graveyard, or I don't remember. There's another one nearby, and we managed to assist her to go to this place. And in that common grave that you see in this graveyard, we recovered her body. This was very interesting because the lady was able to see how we were taking out the body, and she was able to recognize the body. It was just bone after many years. How can you recognize that? Because she recognized in one of the bone structures a chain, a religious chain, and she remembered that her daughter never let go that chain. So that's like the DNA of the relative. The second story that I want to tell you is the story, and it's a struggle, more than 20 years a struggle to give dignity for that daughter, to find her and to close this case and to give closure to this case. It's not just a demised person, it's an alive person who meets her family. She was recruited just 12 years old. She was just 12 years old. She became part of the armed group. She had to file her paperwork, and she didn't have the accurate information because at 12 years old she didn't remember about the information of her family. And this is a meeting, a re-encounter, and I want to she used the word I wore down the my shoes trying to find her. And the other one is the Familia Angulo story. Familia Angulo went to the Truth Commission and they gave their testimonial. They went to the jurisdiction, special jurisdiction for peace. She went to the unit, the search unit, and asked it to search their loved ones. My 3 minutes expired, but I think that it's very important to tell you with examples what have we learned from about dignity. In this family, when we were recovering the body, the anthropologist had organized the ground where we were going to perform the search, and that man over there with the green sweater told the anthropologist, I want you to tell me if you can change the order to approach this space. And she asked him why. He said, because I would like you to look for in this section, and told him why. The anthropologist said, do you have a feeling? Yes, I have a feeling. And the anthropologist said, yeah, we will start tomorrow from that chunk. And they prayed yesterday, as the Chiva Cortez has told the, their children. Miss Carbenza, during the kidnapping, had prayed every day at 6 p.m. She was praying every afternoon. And the next day they undertook the search in that place that the relative told, and there we found Miss Carmenza. That is dignity, and that is what we have learned. It's not just information providers. Thank you very much.
Gracias. Thank you. Luz Marina. Eduardo Cifuentes. Well, thank you for having me today. First of all, I would like to greet the members of the panel and all of you as well. I want to answer this question from the perspective of the comprehensive peace system, not only of the jurisdiction, special jurisdiction for peace. And in this sense, as I see it, we have an idea about the victims because they are the victims of serious violations of human rights, international humanitarian law, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, as just like still people sitting down. I think the experience of the different institutions in this system has shown that, on the contrary, there is a lot of dignity in the country, and this dignity is in the victims, is stored in the victims. This has all the sense. Using Luz Marina's last words, I think as providers of the truth, we observe the role of dignity. This is dignity that wanted to occupy the space of truth, the dignity of people who have been collecting and gathering the truth directly. They had it, they were sleeping with it, it was all the time in their everyday lives, penetrating their existence. It was always there. When the peace agreement and the constitutional standards implemented, the other legal standards that developed it, created the right channels in these three institutions, the Commission for Growth of the Truth, the Missing Persons Unit, and the GEP were channels that the victims used copiously. For example, in the case of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, the criminal process is presided by the monopoly of the state in the exercise of criminal exercise. It's a topic of the state. However, here in transitional justice, the expropriation from the state will give place for the individuals of the process of transitional justice, the ones who perform this duty. And somehow the deponents, the victims, and the transitional justice is a coordinator, a moderator, a guidance. But actually, the social problem and the conflict is solved there, where we have different narratives in play. In this sense, we've seen a position that is strong from the victims. This is called dignity. Thanks to dignity, there was a report drafted, never published before, and its value for the truth is transcendental for the Commission. And this is thanks to the victims. Thanks to the victims, the unit has regional plans that had never been drafted before. And thanks to the victims, in the case of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, macro processes among others, due to the reports for the victims and the reports of human rights. In 95% of the cases, the deponents didn't have any other alternative but to bow down to the accusations derived from the comparison based on the victim reports. So, being the source of the truth is an expression of dignity. Now, the answer by the Colombian state and society should be a transformative answer. It is not only about sharing a truth or opening our hearts, exploring the past, bringing it to the present, but also looking for transformation and actual change in the country. And we have to do this. We need to respond to dignity. Finally, this dignity is transforming in a subjective sphere. In the first hearings, we saw that the dignity space is not restricted only to the victims, but those deponents who confess, who share what they did before the victims. We can go to a different subjectivity. And the victims, on the other hand, when they know the truth, when they face the truth, they recognize that they must go on with their life project, and at least they are mitigating their sorrow, their old sorrow they are carrying as a burden. So this is one. The comprehensive system for peace has hosted victims as dignified beings, and here they found a large reservoir of dignity that will feed the country in the future and will be the origin of amazing transformations. Thank you, Eduardo. Pacho, what has this journey taught us, teaches, and dignification and dignity of victims? Well, before answering your question, I would like to say that I feel so, how to put it, humbled, satisfied to be here on stage. Thank you, Eduardo, Luz Marina, our partners from the system. We've been working with our hearts. Thank you, Roberto, because the OAS, MAPP, since you were in the institution, this was key for us. Thank you, Helena, for being in Colombia, coming all the way to work for peace in this country. Thank you, Victoria, because you, despite the difficulties in religious terms, despite all the temptations, having 300 and something, more than 300 partners killed, you are still here fighting for peace. This is a great lesson learned for Colombia. Answering your question, I've seen a transformation in the world of victims from the recognition, from listening to the victims. This is the first thing we did, I think, particularly the victims of forced disappearance and the victims of false positives. When we have met these victims that are so hard, these meetings, first a brutal sorrow, brutal pain, rejection to the state, and condemning all the justice, condemnation of justice, rejection of perpetrators, and little by little in the conversations we recognize we need to open to dialogue. Except the first dialogues, there was brutal phasing of the truth and the request to know the truth from all stakeholders, but also transformation in the victims themselves, who grabbing their memories and the dignity of people who were killed. My son didn't have anything to do with it. My son was innocent. My father, who disappeared, was a great citizen working for this country. I want to vindicate my son's dignity, and this is full of strength In the same lines, the first thing I felt was that at some point the victim facing the victimizer or the perpetrator, recognizing his responsibility. I don't know if there are any of the former militaries who acknowledged the brutality of the crimes in the audience, but the victims held that suffering, and one thing they found was understanding the moral authority they had. The victims understood progressively that they have the moral authority to say, this is what happened to us. This is what we suffered brutally. We want transitional justice. Of course, we were expecting to know the truth, but something else we want to say. We don't want revenge. We don't want other people to suffer what we suffered. What we want is that this that happened will never happen again in Colombia. And they said with full moral authority, they only have the victims because they suffered that. And what you mentioned as well, the political stance. We're gonna fight for peace in this country above all. This is my view. This is what I feel. I think the victims have transformed us, have changes. This is the episode that occurred in Havana after telling the Colombian military, telling the guerrilla about the suffering of the victims and telling those horrible things. Look at what the Colombians are capable of when they want to break someone, to destroy someone. Atrocities. But the Colombians are not only this. Colombians can look into their eyes and shake hands again and venture to build a new country together. Thank you very much, Father Francisco. Helena, what's your view? Your opinion will be shorter. It's just a reflection. What's your reflection as a victim in your process, feeling dignified, obviously, by this stage of peace building? Thank you very much. I am Eleonora Videgain. I thank you for having me today with this reputable group of people. Well, you were telling the experiences. I think it is also worth mentioning briefly our experience. I cannot speak on behalf of the victims. Many times we are in the same package as if we were the same. But I cannot speak on behalf of my family. I can speak on a personal basis. And what I can say is there are lots of victims who have shared a journey that has been there for many years, looking for justice. And we, those who suffered in the attack to the Palace of Justice, we had to wait for how many years? 22 years initially for the Attorney General's office to open the case of the Palace of Justice. And then that was a re-victimization, waiting for so many years since after the prosecutor was taken out of the case, concretely my father's case. Then we had to go to the international human rights law, and Colombia condemned Colombia for this action. And for me, and well, the importance of transitional justice, the comprehensive peace system. I'm talking about this case because this is what I experienced, feeling. It's a paradox. It's a paradox because it is so painful and so sorrowful to wait for an institution to recognize what happened to you when you know what you lived, what you experienced, and you know the truth. But other institution from abroad or local institution should accredit this truth. That's kind of funny because it's satisfying, but I have to wait for someone else to acknowledge what I'm saying. Anyway, for me, this was great support, feeling that other people were believing in us. We were not crazy, and actually, well, I was saying about my father. He was not a guerrilla member. He had not been killed by the guerrilla. He hadn't been killed by the bullets, lost bullets. He had been tortured and disappeared by the army forces of Colombia. And from there, in my particular case, this was the drive to raise my voice without any hesitation. And now talking about the comprehensive peace system. What is the question? Okay. Now, having this system in Colombia and other people not to experience this again, that's something coming from Colombia. This will shorten their journey, and in the universe of victims, in the end, we understand that we are all the same in sorrow and pain, regardless of their perpetrators. There are different degrees of criminal responsibility among perpetrators, but in sorrow and pain, the victims are the same. And I know this because I was in the hearings in case 01. And, well, thank you, Helena. Well, Victoria, I know we have to be brief, less than 2 minutes. Don't worry. We think your opinion is totally relevant. I would like to say hello to everyone here, the top representatives of the system, Helena, and you as well, of course. I believe that dignification of victims is a process that started from Havana, but it is still an ongoing process. It is not finished. It started back in Havana when they started listening to the victims, when they acknowledged there was a universe of victims who had been produced and affected by the armed conflict. This is not a conflict as we see it of 20, 30 years. It's more than 6 decades of conflict. This is a factor we need to keep our eyes on. Helena was saying, how long have we waited? Actually, the generation of this victimization against the Colombian people and society comes back in time, comes from a long time ago. Second, this is the start of the process. Why? Because we, of course, recognize the progress we have made to this day. But this is just the beginning, because, as I said, the topic of victims, dignification of victims, is going beyond. We need to know the truth, the total truth, the truth from all the stakeholders, not the two demons who pretend to create that. It is not about two demons, good and or evil and less evil. This society used violence in every way possible to remain in power. Others used it to transform reality. This is part of an acknowledgement, and this generated victimization. Third, of course, in addition to truth, justice. But justice, access to justice, is not only coming from the GEP or the ordinary justice, or even from the commission or the missing persons search unit. We're talking about social justice. Many of the victims who were taken away from their territories, who were expelled from the territories, or even the victims of disappearance, recruitment, false positives, or the executions, out of court executions, illegal executions. It minimized and removed the rights of people that were left behind. Today, the Colombian society, especially the Colombian state, have a historical responsibility. We are on the right path on this first step. If all the system, the special jurisdiction, the missing person search unit, and the commission manage to draft a report right now under the conditions of the country and the administration that we had, well, I believe that we have a lot of hope today for the victims and the society in general. This process is a responsibility of us all, and we will work tirelessly. Personally, I will work tirelessly and reiterate, and I've been in trouble because of this. I want to highlight that we will continue to work on building peace and going deep into the truth and justice for Colombian society who has been a victim. Thank you, Helena. Well, quickly, I think I didn't go straight to the point, but we are in a time of hope and change. It doesn't start with the change of administration and total peace and the support of the comprehensive peace system. We start with the institutions, and I think that not only for me, but this is the starting point for me that brings me back to Colombia, but for many other people, they are feeling they are recognized as human beings with rights, nor as subhuman or second-hand human beings. This is what we feel in Colombia due to impunity and feeling that we recovered our dignity, and society acknowledges that pain we've suffered. And we are encouraged, or I am encouraged, to come here. The victims want to work for peace. Thank you. I would like to express that we have mistreated so much the method and the times. So I must say that dignification and dignity of the victims is worth it for one more minute, for each minute of life and in suffering. So very well used this time. We need to accelerate a little bit. We're going to talk about technically about the system. Very briefly, please. From the logic of the system, there are some questions. Pacho, from your perspective, what is the greatest achievement of the system? Luz Marina, what is the greatest challenge the system has faced today? Eduardo, from the perspectives, objectives, from the beginning of the sign, the greatest element that has not been satisfied, the greatest need that needs to be satisfied as a system. Victoria and Helena, can you please tell us briefly about a difficulty or an achievement that was not met? from your perspective. Okay. Greatest achievement first. 2 minutes each, please. Okay. That's a complex question, but Roberto, I think that the greatest achievement would be the truth, the happening of the truth. The country understood that human dignity, we were talking about, we will reach that if we have courage, if we are bold enough to go against our fears, the fear of asking what actually happened in this country among this deep sorrow and pain, and feeling and knowing that since 1985 to till 2008 there were some concrete names in their list. 451,000 people who died because of war, only because of the war. They would be alive if there had been no war. And also some of your people, Victoria, around 90,000 young women and men died from the army, the paramilitary, the guerrilla, the police. 90,000 young people in a senseless war. And in addition, of every 10 people who died, 8 were civilians. And something Victoria mentioned, it is not only struggle between the FARC and the army. This is a disaster, and the system has placed the truth on the front, and we're building on it. This is why Stefan's invitation, I was listening to you on my phone, the invitation to continue positioning the truth through education in the country, so that the country will not be afraid of the truth, and we can build the system on the truth. Thank you. Ms. Marina? Okay. The challenge is written here. I'm going to read it. I totally agree, Stefan, with you. After 5 years, the greatest challenge is completeness. And what is it in practice? The design of the system is so important. It is very well planned in terms of the needs of the victims. The victims don't only need one answer, but a set of answers that gather everything they experienced. It wasn't only disappearance, there were a lot of other things, and they have greater expectations than finding their loved ones. So when I was writing this, integrality, completeness, and the methodology for completeness is the greatest challenge. I understand that the comprehensive system as a system is so powerful to repair victims, to avoid institutional duplicity, lack of coordination among institutions, and contradictory answers or delays in the answers. This is what the completeness should address. All the institutional practices will bring lack of hope and increase the damage and harm on the victims. And the construction of transitional justice, implementation of transitional justice, the challenge is transformation. You also mentioned that. What do we need to transform? The relationship of the state and the victims, and the coordination. I think the system has brought this to the table, or maybe it is brought as a principle. A coordinated and response within the system would avoid more harm. And I believe that this has been the challenge, and it is not permanent. This challenge has been due to different timing. The commission started running. We were trying to design and the jurisdiction was thinking about the methodologies, the procedure. We were in different timings, so this concept couldn't be commissioned immediately, but we learned so many lessons. This challenge will be, it will be overcome. It will be important for peace building.
Thank you, Luz Marina. Two achievements and frustrations of the comprehensive system for peace. Lorena mentioned the first one of them, and it is a low, short synergy in an initial state, wherein each of the agencies that made up the system were barely beginning, and they had problems to complete the regulation baseline. They had to have the appropriate mechanisms, technology, budget, hearings, determination, and so on and so forth. And therefore, that capacity to circulate the final outcomes was not easy. Notwithstanding the above, the regime of conditions is the one that balances the benefits granted by HIP, which allowed some of the people that were interviewed to have the possibility to actually be interviewed. But the synergy was important in the first trench, or in the first stretch, but it will be presented, will take place a major mutual benefit in terms of truth, benefit, justice, and reparation and non-repetition. This harvest of truth by the Clarification Commission is for the special peace jurisdiction, and for the unit it's truly a powerful tool to deepen into the exercise of their skills, and also at the same time for victims to achieve truth that then becomes judicial truth and then turns into meetings in the case of missing persons, and deepening of the regional plans. Now, achievements that are the result of historical accidents and national disgrace. And the thing is that these agencies that make up the system, at a certain degree, we must confess that we are fragile, because we must be channels to receive truth. We must inspire trust to the victims that resort to the comprehensive system to share what happens to them in 6 decades of conflict, and also trust with the people attending the hearings and the interviews. But the murder of more than 300 ex-combatants of former FARC, the murder of social leaders in the regions, more than 1,000 social leaders, the absence of the state in the mostly affected territories, where you have appearing persons and victims, and at the same time a low rate of real implementation of the commitments that arise from the peace agreement, created a setting that made difficult the exercise of the skills, the fully exercise of the skills. More than 6 simultaneous conflicts. It's something very difficult for agencies. Wouldn't be brittle, but barriers of hope and change, if others had been the conditions. I believe that it is necessary to have a total peace. I believe that it's necessary in the case of the special jurisdiction for peace, not only to grant benefits from the beginning, even if they are intermediate or provisional, but the appearing persons to carry out reparation and to instill mechanisms for the works in charge of the appearing persons are incorporated into big projects from the state where effectively that can become a reality, sustainable and feasible. So what used to be conceived as a simultaneous exercise of truth, reparation, non-repetition, resurrecting terrorist victims that meet themselves roads of progress and social stabilization didn't happen. And I truly say, I confess, dear Roberto, that it has been a miracle. It's been a miracle arising from the victims and the eagerness of these agencies. We have today a system that is starting to meet their own targets. We have begun and we continue in amid an adverse climate. We cannot deny that. Leaders and ex-combatants are still being murdered. There is not a real demobilization with guarantees. We don't see a state that is producing important projects. I repeat, to insert, to incorporate victims and ex-combatants. Without total peace, it's not possible to have 100% performance from the exercise of our skills. Eduardo, Victoria, Elena, we have heard Stefan, Luz Marina, Eduardo, Francisco, to talk about achievements, difficulties, frustrations, expectations not met for factors like the design and the operation of the system, the context. I will ask you to choose one option, one achievement, one difficulty, one expectation not achieved from your personal perspective as a victim and from your individual perspective as ex-member of FARC and as member of that group that is also part of the implementation. Well, I think one of the achievements of the comprehensive system for peace compels us all as society to face this past of violence and help us to go through this collective trauma. Traumas is a collective trauma that we all have gone through, and we have lived that kind of ghost steam and leads us to ask, why did it happen? Who allowed it to happen? What was the role of everyone for this to happen, to make this possible? This is not just a matter of perpetrator and victim. There are many stakeholders, and we all must wonder what was the role of each one. That's one of the biggest achievements of the comprehensive system, although there is resistance from those who don't want to accept. Hopefully one day they accept it. For the victims, I believe oftenly legal processes and understanding help us to understand this. The shock can take many years to assimilate. It helps us to assimilate. Thank you very much. I'd like to talk about the absence and the difficulties. And this was part of the discussion in Havana, and I want to draw it on very briefly. At least in my case as comprehensive system, I had more expectations. To comply that role as comprehensive system and transitional justice, I mean a restorative justice, and even more. Today, the punitive nature, which is still there, living in the system, didn't allow the universe of the Colombian society which is engaged, which was engaged in the conflict, has participated and still participate in the system. I believe that is one absence, and it's still a problem. We agree, as president of HEP says, we join total peace, a peace that involves all the sectors, but we should touch the wounds of those who suffered and the responsibilities of those who participated directly or indirectly in this conflict to be able to collect the universe of victims. Awesome. Thank you, Victoria.
Cerrando.
We should wrap up. We will reduce some of the topics that were of the interest of everybody to work.
Por favor, una última reflexión.
I will ask you to share a last message. It's not even a reflection. It's just a final message. There is an invitation. It's just an invitation. If this message could identify a contribution and a specific contribution on the design and implemented so far from and through the system, we can attribute it to the world in the matter of transitional justice. One contribution of the experience. We could issue a 1-minute message that we could have covered today, the experience of the victims, the people, the experience of the accountable person in the institution. I will start with Francisco. 1 minute. I invite you all to take seriously the recommendations, to take the recommendations of the Truth Commission seriously, as they are introduced here. The big or total peace with ELN, with dissidents of defectors of FARC, and the groups that must be subjected to justice. Secondly, the transformation of security system, instead of security for property and more security for more property and maximum security for the maximum property, security for the people equally. We do take care of a kid on Choco the same way you take care of a member or congressman, and also an education labor in depth about peace in this country, and to fight decisively against impunity through the strengthening of the system of transitional justice system. Danilo is just arriving. It's good to have you with us.
Gracias. Luz Marina.
Thank you, Francisco. Luz Marina. In this minute, I hope to make it, I hope I can make it, a fundamental contribution of the comprehensive system is having included early the search of the missing persons. The agreement signed before the signature of the agreement in 2015, and it was those trust actions to provide information on the missing persons, having included a mechanism that would take care of the search for missing persons and to acknowledge the suffering, the loneliness and indifference of thousands and thousands of victims in this country is the most important contribution for peace building. That made a difference, where they included within the Truth Commission to tell something but not the search for missing persons. Having acknowledged the fight, the dignity, and the claim, the legitimate claim of the victims in Havana, creating a mechanism, specific mechanism for the search for missing persons was fundamental. I close with the next thought. The conclusions of the report of the Truth Commission propose that we had the opportunity to talk about this. It is necessary to have coordination of the state to be able to move forward, to find the missing persons, to identify more than 25,000 bodies without identification, to expedite the identification of the people whose bodies we are finding to strengthen the Forensic Institute, the regional search plans to dialogue with the macro cases of the special jurisdiction for peace, but also with the appropriate actions. That is key for the search for missing persons, and this is an essential contribution for peace building. The relief of suffering is the basis for peace in the country. Eduardo, the question is about the contribution to the world from the experience and the regulation base of the comprehensive system for peace. I believe a first contribution, and a big one, is to accredit before the world that you cannot resign neither the judicial truth nor the extrajudicial truth nor the search for missing persons. In other contexts, all the Truth Commission operates only, but here it has been demonstrated that it's compatible and necessary. A Truth Commission also maintaining the seek for judicial truth and the search for missing persons. That is a historical contribution of the comprehensive system. The second one is the dialogue baseline, as Father Deroux said, the capacity to listen. In addition to the capacity to listen is the dialogue capacity. It's exceptional what is happening in Colombia with the special jurisdiction for peace in the search unit as two surviving agencies. On the one hand, for crimes, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, which in the criminal, international, and national systems is punished through judicial proceedings, strict proceedings, and with sentences of prison, to give the opportunity to resolve this by the conversation between the appearing victims and the intervention of judges, is unprecedented from the point of view of the world of the compared law. And it has been demonstrated that that dialogue is producing in HEP that 95% of sentences that have conversation base is accepted by the appearing persons. So that conversation system works even for aspects that in other countries are dealt with heavy instruments, rough instruments. And finally, it's been demonstrated to the world that it is not about only to recover the past through these institutions, but also this justice and this truth has perspective value, a foundational, transformational value. Somehow we are entering into a new constitutive process of the Colombian society, of the nation as a whole. Those are three contributions, valuable contributions of the comprehensive system to the world. Thank you very much. I consider that the main contribution that we give to the world in these conditions is the system in itself. With all the elements that you have proposed, I think it's unprecedented within this process that we had been working on, and do not unattended, dear colleagues from the institutions, from the agreement and the system, is that this is not, for instance, in the case of HEP, a court of defeated or winners against defeated people. It's a conversational tribunal, and the search unit, of course, it's an innovative aspect and dignity building aspect. And the Truth Commission, which is not just a work of the truth as such, but also non-stigmatization or ostracism, is something that we must keep working for, that stable justice and that total peace that we want to implement in other scenarios. Thank you, Victoria. We will close the session. Sorry, Elena, I had left you for the staring closure Is the same question? Yeah. What I admire of this system is how it managed to synchronize respect for international justice standards with our right to truth and justice and right to peace, rather, in Colombia, in the one hand, and the fact that there are different agencies working jointly with different discipline, different skills from each institution seeking the same target and now thinking of the contribution to the world. Recently, there was a sentence issued against a Russian soldier, a tribunal in Ukraine, to 63 years of prison for having, he said, obeying orders from his commanders. From here we can show that there are other more effective ways. Well, I also have something that I would like to contribute, maybe to improve or to keep in mind in regards to the system. And this is based on the dialogues in Havana that were appealing to me. Why the case of Justice Palace was not included. Why there were no victims of that case? Oh my God, it's something that split the history of Colombia in two. It should be considered at the time of selecting the people that will be characters of these events. From the moment that HEP accepts a coroner, the magistrate in charge of the military criminal justice says, this was not a matter of chance. Why did you skip Justice Palace? Why did you skip this? Then the military. These are things that we must refine, and it's important to give more opportunities to children to tell. I was 10 years old when tortured execution and torture of my dad happened, and when we were kicked off Colombia, and nobody never asked us. It's always the adults who speak for the children, but the children are also embedded in this violence. It's good to give them the possibility. There are certain difficulties. They must be assisted by an adult to make this possible, to make possible children to have a word, because that helps them to go through the mourning and to go through that pain process. There is a chapter in the report of the Truth Commission, which I think is great, but it would be important to include them even further, and to subpoena third parties in all the land aspect. Thank you. We will close this panel. I want to ask you just 1 minute, one more minute, to thank once again the Truth Commission for having assisted the MAP, in my case, to participate as moderator in this scenario. I'd like to share with modesty a contribution, a suggestion. I believe this could be a contribution of the process to the world, and a suggestion. Respectfully, by the way. I think that the commitment and the intensity of the assistance and international support to the system, to peace building on a daily basis in the territories, as we have to do, that level of commitment and intensity, it's a contribution to be considered in the design of other processes in the world. Understanding Of course, that the main players is not the international community, but the institutions and the community of the country. The invitation also vis-a-vis, more than an invitation, a suggestion to the transitional justice system in the world for peace building is that when national stakeholders are thinking, designing, and invite international community, convene the international community to be engaged, to assist, to support, to do it in a broader sense. The sense of international community is as wider as possible and not exclusive, with a sense of cooperation. Not all the states and the societies have the possibility to cooperate financially by funding with resources. We can cooperate with supportiveness. You can cooperate with technical assistance, with human support. But the invitation as contribution, I cannot be so haughty to consider the next design on in the other design of transitional justice a wide, broader participation of the international community. Thank you very much again, and special acknowledgement to the panelists. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Luz Marina. Thank you, Patch. And now we have invited for the closure short word the High Commissioner for Peace, but also the High Commissioner for Peace, Danilo, is an old colleague of works and fights, and I feel honored to close our forum to have Danilo to have the last intervention. Thank you very much to the Truth Commission, to the President, Antonio, and the whole working team, and those who want to remain in the room. I had invited to be in the morning, but I had a problem of agenda. It was difficult, and I had the chance to be here just now. First, I believe that from the last intervention, everything has been said. We have talked about the big piece, and the big piece, the great impact, is that we are talking in our country about transition, which matches a government plan, is different, but the country is talking about transition. As we talk of truths, we talk about energy transition, there is a feeling and an attempt to move from the sad emotions that Mauricio Garcia quotes, to a country with a beautiful existence. Difficult, complex, but I think that we are willing and getting ready with this, first with the demobilization of the paramilitaries, with all the criticism back then, since from the organizations we did, where I used to belong to the space of the civil society, and that started to show goals, how it was possible to create scenarios for truth. And we found, by the way, talking about the missing persons, we found beautiful women in Antioquia who, breaking the paradigms of the big victim social movement, approached the cannibal people who were arrested in the Itagüí jails, and approaching in that dignity and the direct staring directly to scramble down the haughtiness of the one that used to be armed, but that haughtiness that you have, that pride that you have in your daily living when you have made a mistake, to feel some shame, to stand firm, to deny, but to scramble internally and to acknowledge. And we talk about the big peace. I believe that the big peace goes through the search, internal search of recognition of the own shadows of you as a human being. We are not holy persons. We are not perfect. We are what we are. And recognizing this is important to approach the other, the fellow man, the respect and dignity. And the peace agreement with FARC resumes those discussions. We know what happened in the assessment of laws 975, and this about the restorative right started to get a momentum. It was initially conceived as impunity exercise. Of course, coming out of the jail, it's freedom. But there's not a bigger problem than what happens inside, the freedom of your conscience, what is moving inside. And that eats you alive and expresses physically, and expresses in their daily relationships, expresses in the heritage, the children, and the offspring, the future generations. Nothing is free. And Elena said, what happens with children? Apparently, they are infants. They are infants, and their knowledge is much limited than ours. But the thing is that it's a deep knowledge. Talking about the restorative knowledge goes through, in addition to the legal scenario, goes through that nature of the individual, but also becomes or happens in an extrajudicial scenario like it was in the Truth Commission. But beyond the institutions, it began to happen clearly in tens and thousands of victims in different territories in Colombia. And I believe that the idea, beyond the idea, the culture, beyond the culture, the spirit of the transitional justice is here to be part of a world commitment to show other ways of justice beyond the criminal punishment, to show the possibility that the accountable of the harm to a person, to a group of humans, can restore the damage that was caused from scenarios of dialogue, from the location of the context and the places wherein the events happened. And today, that which is criticized and that must be improved is learning. We have a lot of things. We have the incarcerated person sentenced to 60 years, even against decisions of the Constitutional Court that recommends the need to assess what a 60-year sentence means. And there are people, even in that condition, they see how timely it is to live, what it means to live, or to have less years incarcerated. But we have also seen in jails, we have also seen in jails in those human beings that had perpetrated and participated directly the crimes against humanity, decisions of conscience to contribute to the truth, to prevent things to happen again. And we have found amid the pandemic mechanisms on how the victims met with them through letters, WhatsApp messages, and they were generating transformation processes where the affected people and the accountable people had this interaction. And today we have a new possibility through this new government, which has recognized publicly the delivery of the final report and has taken over the conclusion of the recommendation of the Truth Commission. How will this happen in the office? I don't know. But there is a commitment that was reiterated last Sunday. In that commitment, we can envision has concrete elements today. The first one is the willingness for dialogue with all armed groups, without exception, respecting their nature, their self-definition, their identity. Each one in their place, respecting each one in their self-definition, in their identity, with a public manifestation of willingness to make peace part of their movement, to perform approaches, to value their willingness, to appreciate their willingness, and to find ways identifying each stakeholder in its own place, and acknowledging that there are structural issues of historical depth.
The purpose is to go to the territories, and this means that with the unilateral ceasefire or not, the government has a commitment of going there to listen, to dialogue, and to enter into concrete commitments for change in face of profound inequality and marginalization of many human groups in this country. Those many human groups are in the fields and in the cities. That's why the effort for total peace implies necessarily the acknowledgement of urban violence. These urban violence, which sometimes are entangling with invisible threats with rural violence. For example, if we manage that the Cali officers that exerted pressure, that they were in the social explosion in the 13 points where Father Pacho is a witness, and we are witnesses, and Archbishop Dario Monsalve saw it clearly why social dialogue is important with young people, because they had the chance for the officers to provide weapons. But if we can solve comprehensively, systematically, the whole violences that interact, that disappear, that don't have the political connotation, allegedly, we are thinking that we can base the possibilities of cease of most of the armed violence exercises. I insist, understanding its nature, its motivation, but also the government should exert or provide an answer to the rights of the citizens, particularly the layers that are excluded and impoverished in this country. And now we're inviting the society. This respecting the autonomy of society, of course, and as mentioned by the director of the Missing Persons Search Unit. If the government has to coordinate, provide effective answers in that coordination, in its presence in remote areas, there should be someone from the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Mines and Energy, Ministry of Equity, everything, everyone should be there. It is also an invitation for civil society to strengthen the spaces of convergence, of gathering, despite their differences, in order to dialogue in a more effective manner. We have a huge map of creativity from the civil society, but it's too respectfully, it's too ineffective to listen on different instances of civil society the same claims when they could gather and agree, and we could all win in efficacy, in results. And the idea here is that the government comes to the territories, and from the territories, the remote areas should be heard, should be listened, and with our coordinated measures nationwide and locally, we will all be winners. We'll be winners in efficacy. Few resources, financial resources are scarce, economic resources are scarce, but is it necessary to characterize a collective territory for the restitution unit? The GEP has to perform another characterization, the victims unit has to perform another characterization, 3 characterizations on the same territory. Oh my God, how long, how many resources, and nothing is solved. If the community is saying it, let's agree on it. The same characterization will be used for the state agents, they're responsible for the state and the executive power. If we have to make a judgment, we do it. We'll save time, save money. We will not be working extra hours, and will have a greater impact. This is the respectful invitation. Thank you so much to you all for your time, and we hope that everyone is engaged in the total peace that begins from within ourselves for a deep democracy. If we go back to Gandhi and many others that have told us about change starting within, for the institutions to become life. I wish you a happy life. Good night.
Bueno.
Well, I think that this was the best closure ever. Thank you so much. These have been 2 wonderful days. Stefan, thank you. And please, as Danilo was saying, for a beautiful life. Thank you.
¿Ya cerraron la transmisión? ¿Ya cerraron? ¿El streaming? Bueno, Jackie.
You by my side, with you by my side. Yo soy tu canto, yo soy el perdón, soy la convivencia, reconciliación. Yo soy la esperanza